Well, good morning, good afternoon almost for some of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Nancy Easterbrook. I'm Executive Director of Silicon Valley Directors Exchange. We're so delighted that you are able to join us today for a very important webinar. As you may have already seen from the invitation, this is actually part one of two around HR issues for boards. We knew that this was a very big topic and that we have a lot to talk about. So today's session will actually be focused on labor acquisition. For those of you unfamiliar with SVDX, I encourage you to go to our website, svdx.org, to view some of our past sessions and to hear about some of our future programs, all focused around board education and networking. Our session today will be 1 hour in length. We will have opportunity for Q&A. If you submit those through the Zoom feature, we'll try and fold those in throughout the course of the conversation. But I do encourage you to submit your questions and don't wait until the end of the session. We will be recording today's session and it will be available on our website at a later date. It's really my pleasure to introduce our fantastic speakers. I'm so grateful for their time today and sharing their expertise with our community. I'm going to do very, very brief introductions and then pass it off to our moderator. Sean Bear is an experienced executive and entrepreneur in multiple industries and currently CEO at Fountain, a high volume hiring platform. Jenny Dearborn has held C-level positions at various Silicon Valley tech companies and is currently Chief People Officer at Klaviyo and serves as an independent director on several company boards. Kelly Stephen Ways has over 25 years of executive management and consulting experience and is founder and executive chairman of Hitchworks. She is on the board of Form Factor and chair of the advisory board for the Silicon Valley Education Foundation. And our moderator for today, Banashe Aflagi, has over 20 years of experience as founder of a civil rights nonprofit, consultant to the UN, regional director with Amnesty International, and founder of an international private law practice. She's a member of the board of Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco, a member of the board of advisors of Entify, and a member of the board of SVDX. Again, many thanks to all of you for joining us. A special thank you to our panelists, and I will pass the microphone off to Banashe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. So let's just jump right in. It is my distinct privilege to moderate today's panel. We bring to you, as you heard from their bios, 3 seasoned and diverse panelists who are going to be bringing us a cross-section of experience as it relates to this very timely subject. On my corporate board, I serve on the HR and Comp. I chair DEI, and I also serve on our risk committee. And why that's important is because in all 3 of those areas, this subject of talent is top of mind. And so it is with that in mind that I want to kick off the first question, if I can. And really, I'll start off with Kelly and Sean and Jenny in that order, if I may. We are seeing a variety of industries that are impacted around talent. And if you can, Kelly, just kind of give us a synopsis of from a perspective of just level setting on who's listening in from the participants. How did we get here? Why is it that we're here now? And from your perspective, and Sean's already smiling, and I can't wait to get to his answer on this question. So let me just start off at Kelly, if I can be so kind, please.
Yeah, I think, the truth is that the skill sets that are required today across the board, they're changing, every 2 to 5 years, which is, so rapid that it's been hard for us to keep up. We also have, declining birth rates globally, and we have a lot of people leaving the workforce or becoming underemployed by choice. And so we are in a talent shortage, and not a talent war, but a race for skills. And so we got here because I think that we thought things would stay the same, that the HR practices of the past would, what got us here will get us to the next step. And I think that we're going to have to look at more creative ways to tap into talent pools we haven't thought about, to create more broad-based contribution across an organization and tap existing capacity. So thinking of labor acquisition, not only because there's only so much supply on the outside, how are we reskilling and creating more opportunity from the inside to tap into skills we need? So it's going to be a time of, pitching old operating models out and thinking about new ways of doing things. But that's how we got here, I think.
That's some of how we got here. Sean, you've got that smile.
And I'll Kelly's spot on, and I know Jenny has some interesting thoughts here. Look, I take it from a lens, both I happen to be the CEO of a company that primarily hires hundreds of knowledge workers, but our software is actually used by companies to attract talent in the hourly frontline worker. So think grocery stores, restaurants, retail stores, warehousing, logistics, healthcare. What's really interesting is, we have for the last 5 or 6 years thought, wow, there's a huge talent shortage on the knowledge worker side, and that there was no problem on the hourly worker side. Unfortunately, our boards that have hourly workers are realizing that labor acquisition on the hourly worker side is now almost as hard, if not worse, than even knowledge workers. I can give you a sense, for years, people would tell you AI software engineers are the hardest people to hire. That's where the risk is for our business. I can tell you right now, Class A commercial truck drivers is probably the most competitive labor market, not only here in the US, but also in Europe. It's an incredibly difficult thing. And those companies, if they don't have enough drivers to move the merchandise, the shelves are empty in the store, huge problems in terms of making sure they can hit their number and deliver their service to their customers. So really, really challenging environment. But I wanted to kind of bring the perspective that it's not just sort of the people that are sitting on Zooms and working on spreadsheets. It's also, every store you go into now has got a sign up that says, we need people, we need sales associates. So.
Very good. Jenny, how is it from your perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I want to sort of take a big picture step back and just kind of get us thinking about some of the several macro demographic trends that we're really seeing come into play. So we have an aging population, a declining birth rate, declining immigration. Every company is really becoming a tech company. So we used to think, well, we just need technologists at software companies, but that role, yes, truck drivers, but also, software engineers, machine learning, data scientists, that is the most in-demand role at every company, regardless of the industry that you're in. And we also have the technical graduation rate. We have an increase of STEM graduates, but not at the rate that the jobs are needed. So the gap is becoming greater and greater between the supply of technical talent and the demand that we have. We just, from a longevity perspective, a fun stat is that if you're born today in North America, you have a 50% chance of living to 105. If you're born today in Japan, you have a 50% chance of living to 110. So we have this aging population. We're working longer, we're living longer. We need to, like Kelly said, go inside of our organizations and figure out how to reskill the humans that we already have for the jobs that are coming. We need sort of a mind shift change. Instead of saying, oh, I have all these open roles, I have to go outside and look for how to hire to fill these gaps. We need a longer view of talent development and think about, how do I take the humans that I already have and create them to be the humans that I need in the future, because you're just not going to get the supply coming in the top of the funnel the way we used to think about talent acquisition.
Really great. Really great. So, well, then let's go inside and see how is it that these companies need to look at this today, given the humans that are coming down the pipe, right? Gen Z and the rest of those folks, and we hear about this. We hear about, in fact, today, again, there was a talk of Meta laying off 4,000 employees, and we have in the Valley, multiples of thousands. There's a conversation of estimates of data around 180,000 folks have been laid off since November of last year. Okay, so that's happening over here. How do we reconcile that and these layoffs with the number of companies that are actually looking for talent? So let's look at it from the perspective, and I really would love to hear from, starting off with Sean, if we can. How do you see, from your vantage point at Fountain, how are we going to start attracting talent when we're laying off talent and we need talent? How is this, how are we walking this tightrope, right? Like, how is this happening?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I think there's a couple of things that obviously the last 10 years, specifically, in Silicon Valley and frankly, the tech industry writ large, right, has been a period of growth at all costs, meaning, essentially the cost of capital for any given hire was incredibly low. So you could afford to just overhiring was not I don't want to use this word, but it wasn't a sort of real big problem for you, right? Now that the cost of capital especially has gotten very expensive, and especially at sort of the later stage companies, which are the companies that have tens of thousands of employees, right? If those companies now are realizing that in order to hire more folks, I need to get more money, and in order to get more money, it's going to be really painful for my balance sheet and my cap table and all kinds of things, they have to make hard choices. That's why you're seeing these layoffs at these large companies look that way. They have a different mantra. It's no longer growth at all costs being the coin. It's sustainable and smart growth. Now, there are still huge areas of innovation that they need to hire in, right? But there may be areas that they've decided this is less of an important area for us to hire in, right? And I can tell you, just to piggyback on Jenny's conversation, I talked to lots of Fortune 500 CHROs, right? They're talking to their board. They're trying to figure out how are we going to navigate these waters. Going back to Kelly's point, there's one of the most innovative companies, very large company, has 250,000 employees. Talk about attracting talent. They are actually running a program inside their stores, offering assessments to people who are working an hourly job inside of the store to figure out, do we think this person could join our technical team with some training? Kind of think of it as an apprenticeship program. But they're doing that for hundreds and hundreds of people around the country, mostly because they realize I need to not only look outside for great talent, I might need to look inside for great talent.
That's really great, because there's a lot of conversation about that specific thing in terms of, if you're looking for an employee, potentially start looking inside for your next employee. Jenny, speak to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so there's a couple great companies out there. Plum is one of them, that you go through a 30-minute assessment, and it looks at your innate knowledge, skills, and abilities, and your interests and your strengths, and then says, these natural interests can then translate. Like, do you like to, when you go on vacation, get super, super organized and like plan everything? Or do you like to just, see what happens? Well, you can take that natural strength of organization and translate it to this, database, entry-level database, job. So even if you've never done it before, it looks at, what do you love to do? And these are easy, sort of a low barrier to entry type of assessments that a lot of companies are doing. A lot of companies are eliminating the interview process and the resume process and just having a very thin assessment, and then sort of pointing people into an apprenticeship program or, an entry-level job that there's a lot of training and support around teaching you on the job. it's a great way to sort of widen the top of the funnel for tech jobs.
Well, that's perfect, because where I want to go next is this redesign concept. So you're already talking about how do we redesign the future of work. So Kelly, everyone's throwing this term around: redesign the future of work, redesign. What does it mean to you?
So redesigning work is really about, if we think about the traditional job today, it's really an amalgamation of project-based work. When people describe what they do, they describe it in deliverables. So when we break work down into units, we can actually involve more people in getting the work done. But one of the biggest problem statements has been our ability to visualize our skill supply chain, as I call it. And I think the CHRO, and I was a CHRO for 13 years in tech as well, is that I had no way to visualize that supply chain. But with AI and machine learning, I can now attach it to that common denominator called a skill, and I can find non-obvious pathways for people inside, which maybe there's some distance between their current skills and their future skills, but I can't really tap into that capacity and the full power of redesigning work into units unless I can visualize that skill supply chain. So a lot of tech has sort of, AI is a big enabler in this, in allowing us to visualize those skills, match people to gigs. And I, of course, wrote a book called The Inside Gig about this strategy. But how do we attach people to smaller amounts of work that we've redesigned, and then allow for all this productivity and output, as well as engagement, because people are sort of pushed to the work. We democratize work a little bit and we give them more choice. So I personally had a lot of success with this strategy, again, because I had shrinking supply of critical skills and had to look basically internally for a new operating model.
Wonderful. Sean, how do you guys see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting, again, I'll take it from the sort of the larger organization that's maybe powering with the hourly workers, but then I can also talk a little bit from a knowledge worker perspective. One thing that's interesting, I think, if you've read over the last couple of years, all the articles and all the newspapers that talk about the Great Resignation and, knowledge workers deciding they're going to move to Montana and, work from there, and they're going to, live a gig lifestyle, the digital nomad, all kinds of stuff like that. I think all of those articles have been written from a perspective of knowledge workers. What's really interesting when you talk to CHROs, right, of large companies that hire tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of workers, they're seeing a similar concept in even people who are working hourly frontline jobs, right? If you take a company that needs to hire 200,000 people this year in order to kind of handle their attrition and open new stores and warehouses, if that whole model of hiring 200,000 is based on everyone working 40 hours a week or working 32 hours a week, and what they find now is many workers are coming and saying, I want to work here, but 32 hours a week doesn't work for me. I want more flexibility. I only want to work 24 hours a week. Well, that causes massive problems, right? All of a sudden, your model is not going to work because you still need enough people in the store to power the business. Now, instead of hiring 200,000 people, you need to hire 225,000 people just to stay level, right? And what they're finding is someone will come, they'll work for the store, and they say, you know what? 24 hours is great here. I want to do something else with the rest of my week. I want to deliver food. I want to go work at another job. I'm going to do a program over here. It's caused a lot of ripples. This idea of this future of work, I think we've often think about it from just like, who are the people who are moving to Montana and sitting on Zoom calls in their wonderful lodge, right? I think everyone around the world is thinking like, what's going to work for me? What works for my family? What works for my next couple of years? So really interesting insights from when you think about it from both, people who are sitting on Zoom calls, also people who are driving trucks and stocking shelves.
Perfect.
But Banashe, can I add to that? So it's great new research that just came out that interviewed or surveyed 5,000 college graduate about to graduate in May across the US. And 80% of them said that when they start their full-time job, they will also have a side hustle. So there is, this research that's about to be published in whatever, it's about to hit the press this next week. And so they're calling this the side hustle generation, new college grads. And I think we need to think about, and also this great research that just came out from Walmart that's, every year they had been interviewing their workforce and saying, what's the most important thing to you? And for 20 years, it was wages. And for the first time ever, they interview their entire associate population. First time ever, it's the future of work, the future of my job. How is my job going to change? The first time ever for that associate population. So they're thinking about, it's really this interesting tipping point right now about employability, not just employed. Do I have a job now, but what's coming? And how do I keep myself balanced? Even college grads that are going to go get a full-time job, they're thinking 80% of them are going to have a side hustle. They're going to drive Uber.
Jenny, do you think that is from seeing their parents be sort of victims of, corporate layoffs and, wanting to own their own destiny, at the same time wanting flexibility? So they've kind of seen the menu of different experience and they're sort of picking this. In fact, they say that Gen Y, Z, and now Alpha are more mission driven, right? So we think about how to attract this generation. It may be, hey, we're going to give you a jungle gym career here. We're going to build your skill sets and make you more relevant. And your side hustle can actually be inside the company. You don't have to go work all these others. I think we did see when we moved to hybrid work that a lot of people were dual employed where they shouldn't be, right? I mean, 2 full-time jobs, signing up for 2 different companies. So we definitely want to avoid that. But I think the barrier to entry is lower to be able to have a side hustle. And I'm just curious your point of view on that, and Sean, on whether we just
let me just actually bring it to that very question, because listen, today there are 5 generations coexisting in society at the same time, right? So enough of the Gen Z and Alpha are seeing what happened to their grandparents and their parents, right? So we do have that track, but there is something else that's happening, it seems like, with the Gen Zers. And you spoke to it, you touched on it, Kelly, and a little bit earlier, Sean, and that is that mission purpose style of work, right? So if I'm going to have a gig on the side, I'm having a gig on the side, is it because my main position isn't fulfilling my purpose on the planet, or it is fulfilling the purpose, the main job, but I want to do more on that, on those issues? So let me actually pick up on where Jenny left off on that very question. So how do you see it from your vantage point, and in particular the study that you just mentioned?
The study that I just mentioned, it's because they are taking less money. They're mission driven first. And so their first mission driven job, primary job, is less, income. And so you drive for DoorDash to supplement the income. That's the primary outcome of the research that's about to be published. So, in order to make the ends meet, you got to have, you got to babysit on the weekends, be a nanny on the weekends. My daughter's going to graduate in May. She took a job, working for the DA's office in Boston. Very little money, but incredibly mission driven. And she's going to be a nanny for cash on the weekends. So that's how she's going to make the ends meet. And that's very, very typical for these college grads.
Yeah, and I even
Sean,
think you
go
see
for it.
I even see, some folks are, sometimes the mission is, hey, Jenny's daughter, right, is going after a career in the law, right? You have other people who their mission is, I want to live my life. My mission is I want to be able to do these hobbies or these activities, and I want to live this kind of a lifestyle. And if you want, like, if for you, being a mountain biker is, life for you, right? You might have a job for 24 hours at one company, and then you're driving for DoorDash, or you're driving for Uber, or you're driving for Lyft, or you're working for Amazon, or you're doing something to make it work. And maybe neither of those two actual places that pay you is your mission. Maybe your mission is, I want to be the best mountain biker or the best pickleball player that I can be. And that's what I'm doing right now for the next couple of years. So I think you're just seeing this like flexibility, this, I want to live my life. And I think, Kelly, you might be spot on. I think, maybe these folks have seen an earlier generation where they said, I do not want that, where I go into the same building or the same store for 25 years. No one cares about me. I want to do the opposite, and whether that's, I want to go, work my mission because I want to make a difference in a specific industry, or I want to live my mission of, having a life where I can surf every afternoon or whatever it is.
So then, Kelly, given that it's a mission purpose alignment, right? So the mission of the company potentially, or the flexibility is the mission for that company based on what Sean was just saying, and that it aligns with me, the employee's purpose, right? Whether it's pickleballing or a purpose of something greater than myself in terms of law and else. Then how do you attract this type of employee today? How do you form the language? And I mean, like, really, what does the job description look like, sound like? What does the interview process look like? How do you acquire an employee today?
I think the way that you get heart and mind today is more about the alignment between, or line of sight, I should say, between their purpose and your mission. Meaning, how are they going to have the impact that they want to have? And I think the difference is that in the old days, you were lucky, they interviewed you, you were lucky to get the job there and have the opportunity to work there. And then that was the deal. Now it's, why should I work for you? Why should you have me as your employee? And now, how do we personalize and customize what their specific journey might be in our company? And when we're recruiting, it looks a lot like that. And despite the fact that, we've seen a lot of layoffs, we are still in a position to have to amplify and find that line of sight between an individual and their experience and journey in our company and what they're going to get out of it to get them to join. And so I know that when I was coaching my son, who is a fourth-year senior at Northeastern, I said, you need to interview them too, right? It's not just them interviewing you. So I think we're seeing that flip. I think that this generation does not expect to work for you for 25 years. In fact, the likelihood is 3 to 5. And the new deal is, what is the exchange of value? What are they going to do for the company? Do they see an opportunity to have impact? And you'll be sort of lucky to have them for 3 to 5 years. That's
really it, isn't it? I mean, our grandparents would be the company man, right? It was more the man than the woman. And they were there for probably 25 to 30 years. And they were loyal to that company because that company was going to keep them for 25 to 30 years and then have a pension for them in their senior day. And today we know that that's really kind of it's an antiquated approach to business. We don't see that often. And so if we don't see that often, how do we, and this is coming to Sean and Jenny, how do we restructure how we do business? So there's the redesign, but restructure, meaning we are no longer able to have the companies that were established in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and I would even say the early 2000s, and be able to meet the employee, the human being of today. And Sean, you all at Fountain have a perspective of employee first, and have a perspective of the why is fixed, but the how is flexible. You know, that's revolutionary. Employee first. I mean, it's shareholder first. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I think what's really great about this conversation, and you know, even from what Kelly's saying, you know, I think it used to be, if you were thinking somebody's going to be here for 10 years, you can kind of think, all right, well, maybe their first year they can settle in, and you know, after the second year they'll really, you know, then we'll really get moving. I think one of the things we think about at Fountain is, like, you know, you've got about 90 days. That's really the timeline. We one of the things I think great companies are doing right now is making sure that an employee is uber successful in the first 90 days. Like, that they've got real accomplishments, that they're really learning something, they're really growing in development, not in like 3 years, 90 days. It used to be, all right, we're not going to ask you to do too much for the first 90 days because, you know, we don't want to overwhelm you. I think you've got to flip that on its head, and you've got to, like, you want that person to really be engaged in the first 90 days, because you really only have maybe 10 of those periods left. For that person might be going to school, looking for another career, moving to somewhere else in the world. So kind of putting that employee first, but literally thinking about it from day one.
Banafsha, if I could add some data to the conversation. So this goes back to the life expectancy data point, that if you are 70 today, you probably had about a 40-year career. You know, I'm 50, so I will have a 50-year career based on my life expectancy. My kids, who are, you know, 25, 22, you know, they will have a 60-year career based on their life expectancy, because people are retiring later. You know, our retirement, you know, funds are getting smaller. So people, not only do you get to work longer because you're healthy, you have to work longer because your retirement's not going to be the same. So if you have a 60-year career, you need to think about work, learn, change, work, learn, change, work, learn, change, and that you're just constantly absorbing new information and being mobile with your career. And employers need to understand that whether or not, you know, with early talent, whether they know this sort of and they can articulate it, or they just feel it instinctively, employers need to understand that that's what's on the mind of new hires, you know, whether it's college grads or just people new in their career. They're always thinking about, okay, I have this job now, but what am I learning now? How can I, like Sean said, how can I be successful in the first 90 days? Because I never know when this job is going to end. Whether I initiate it or the company initiates it, I've always got to be thinking about, how am I learning, growing, what new skills, you know, how can I take this experience and translate it to what's next? Because I'm going to have a really long career that's going to have a lot of twists and turns, and I've got to be learning and growing the entire time to keep myself employable for that entire journey.
Jenny, tell me a little bit about what you see in terms of attracting talent. So the same question that I had posed to Kelly, what do you see in terms of, and I mean, really, like, as specific as you can in the context of everything we've talked about thus far. What do those interviews look like? But even before the interviews, what does the job description look like? How are you attracting this talent?
Yeah, so I think job descriptions of the past were written really like, okay, candidate, this is what we need from you. from the company's perspective. The best job descriptions today are going to be about, this is what we're going to give you, candidate. From the company's perspective, this is what's in it for you. You're going to learn this. You're going to grow here. We're going to invest in you. You're going to take training classes. You're going to have a mentor. You're going to have cool projects. You're going to work with amazing colleagues. You know, it's all, and best companies that have the lowest attrition and the highest offer acceptance rate, right? I mean, for every employee that doesn't turn over, you know, down the line, that's one less that you need to hire, right? So the companies that have the best job of employee retention and have the highest employee engagement are very employee focused and are really thinking about, how can I help you learn and grow and advance? And in that interview process, it's a sales, you know, you think of talent acquisition similar to a sales funnel. You know, the employee, you know, the employee talent journey is very much like the sales process, right? You're doing lead gen in your employer branding, and your TA folks really are sales reps, and they are selling to the candidate about how, if they come to your company, how you can invest in them, what training opportunities they will have. People don't make decisions based on comp. They make decisions on, how will you keep me employable for the 60-year journey that I'm about to start, which is freaking scary, right? So, you know, don't just use me up and then throw me away, right? You know, how are you going to keep me learning, growing, advancing? You're going to have a mentor, you're going to have a coach, you're going to have cool stretch assignments, you're going to work on really hard projects, but we're never going to throw you in the deep end. You know, how are you really going to
Bonachay,
I wonder if I could jump. Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
I love this. You guys are on this question. Kelly, ladies first, and then Sean, please.
One of the things that I think is interesting from the board standpoint is this notion that there's the rise of the social enterprise and the pressure that is now put on the board and executive management, that with the fact that employees now look to their companies more than government on critical issues. And we saw that with the pandemic. So the other side of this equation is, you know, when the George Floyd issues happened, I was on vacation and I got a call from my Dutch CEO saying, what is the statement I need to make? Or better yet, I don't want to. And all of a sudden, you know, whether it was the pandemic or it was these critical historical moments, social movements, even suddenly where the company is in the, like, having to take a political stance or something, that is so different than what we had to do. And the implications of it, back to the fact that this generation is mission and purpose driven, is judgments will be made, for better or for worse, your reputation, your ability to hire, on these moments that matter. And so I just sort of put that out to my peers, like, what guidance do we give the board here?
So I want to go to the board question in just 1 minute, because I actually have a question teed up for you guys. But Sean, go ahead and jump in on this last one.
Yeah, just the only thing I think that's also interesting, you know, we talk about I think Jenny's spot on and Kelly's spot on, but the idea that, you know, I think people have thought about talent attraction. I think the sales funnel is just simply brilliant. Like, thinking about it like a sales funnel, really brilliant. And obviously, you've got to think about where you stand on all of these issues. One thing that's just really interesting from the data that Fountain sees, and again, this is skewed primarily to sort of frontline workers, but last year we processed roughly 30 million applications around the world in 77 countries. 85% of the people who applied for one of those 30 million plus jobs did so on a phone. Mm. It is incredible when you talk to a talent acquisition team, how many of them view their sales funnel, their career page, their job descriptions sitting in a laptop, and saying to them, 85% of the people are going to read that description on a screen this big. 85% of the people are going to have to click this button and try to upload this document on a mobile device, right? All of this idea around, like, how do you attract people? It's really, I mean, that's an incredible departure from 10 years ago when, you would open up your browser and type in all the information and write the perfect cover letter that you can imagine. Those days are definitely changing fast in this world.
So we've got two questions that I'm seeing. Actually, I'm seeing a number of comments going back and forth in our chat, and I want to make sure that I bring in a couple of questions. But I do want to go back to the earlier subject on the board's side of things and how they play a role. So let me ask this. And some of you have already talked about the AI issues. And so the question is, are you hearing conversations on sustained growth with fewer employees due to chat GPT and AI productivity increases likely over the next couple of years? And Jenny's head is going strong in affirming this. Yes, please, Jenny, go for it.
Yeah, so I think that for a board, your HR department is going to fight you on this. And this is the role of the board, is to really push. And if you have a forward-looking CHRO, they're going to understand that jobs going away to AI and chat GPT is not scary, that humans should only be doing work that humans can do. And if it can be automated, it should be automated. And if, a human has a stack of tasks that they do, you can automate the bottom half, and then that human can sort of up-level their skills and do work that's not currently being done. That's good for everybody. And there's plenty of work to go around. And, it's an opportunity for changing jobs and not eliminating jobs, right? It's because we have fewer humans and too much work to get done, but it's a lot of work, right? That's a hard talent transformation journey for a CHRO to go through. And the board should start the process now of pushing the comp committee and the CHRO on that journey. It's going to be scary. There's going to be jobs that are currently cutting and pasting spreadsheets, that are going to go away. And that is just the nature of change. And boards need to start those conversations now, even if you can't even imagine how the jobs in your company are going to change. Boards should start to ask those questions and gently move CHROs along. And because the actual change may not be 3 years down the road, but that change management process needs to start yesterday.
Kelly or Sean, do you guys have anything to add on this question?
Kelly, I mean, one thing that's interesting at Fountain, we have a Fountain AI product. It's you can think of it as a large learning language model that helps recruiters do some of those tasks that Jenny was talking about. Let me get some basic information from the candidate. Let me schedule interviews. That is something a recruiter, especially in the world of frontline hiring, they're doing that for hundreds of people a day. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of interviews at hundreds of stores. That is a task that a computer can do, dare I say, better probably than most of us could do, certainly more than Sean could do. So those kind of tasks I can see very, very quickly becoming really automated from an AI perspective and a chat GPT perspective. But Jenny, I think, is spot on. There are just things, you can automate a lot of the hiring process. Someone needs to meet that person and say, are you going to be a good fit with our team, right? No matter how qualified that person is, there is just going to be that human world. I think what we'll see is these technologies will sort of focus people's time into the things that Jenny said, like that really only humans can do, right? While removing a lot of the kind of routine tasks, repetitive tasks.
Yeah, if you think about it, what AI cannot replace is what humans really do best, which is that's why we will always have jobs, and especially where it requires judgment, because chat GPT is not going to apply judgment. in its purest sense. I think I want to point to, and I fully agree that we need to automate low-level tasks and push the humans to the most valuable work that they can do. I think I will call out one concern, since board members are, our oversight of risk. I think that I am not, from an HR standpoint, running to be first on ChatGPT related to HR applications, because my concern is, of course, bias, is the potential for litigation and discrimination. And so I think there's still sort of the black box about ChatGPT that we don't fully understand. It's okay to be maybe a fast follower or a little bit of a laggard here in some cases when it applies to HR use cases. Scheduling for recruiting, not a lot of risk there. Making a choice on between candidates, there is probably some risk. I do think, to flip to the positive, where can ChatGPT really help? I think managers being more articulate in, how they're writing feedback, communications that can be more inclusive because they're asked to be, hey, these are the conditions, I'd like to write this in a more inclusive manner. Getting help or digital assist, it could be very valuable. I just want to amplify that as board of directors. I think we need to be a little bit skeptical and make sure that we understand all the implications and some of these choices with respect to HR application.
Yeah, Kelly, I just want to piggyback here. I talked to a company and they said, well, this chat GPT can answer all kinds of employee questions. This was another company that I was talking to, and they said, so think about it. Employee writes in and nobody has to answer that question. Chat GPT will answer it. And I was immediately skeptical, because it's like, what if you ask the Chat GPT, can I get a raise? How much does this job pay? Like, I don't think you want Chat GPT telling your employees what their next salary raise will be. I think you really want, that's a human being thing. I don't think you want to let, some AI chatbot decide answering critical HR questions without oversight from a real human being using judgment. So I think you can run into some challenges, especially from a risk perspective.
That's right. That's
So
right.
you guys, you're the best panelists. More and more, Nancy, we need panelists who are in the space of human and people, because you're so easy to communicate on all these issues. When we have other topics, it's really pulling from them to speak on any issues that they're experts on. So let me ask you this question, you guys. Going back to the board. So, and I'm going to be as PC and politically conscious as I possibly can. We have boards across the country and around the world that are of a different age category, right? This is definitely a different generation that's sitting on the boards than those who we're talking about acquiring talent that we're looking to bring. Their viewpoints aren't necessarily the viewpoints shared here today, potentially. They have a shareholder, bottom line P&L drive for the company, and that's where their focus is, and that rightfully so is where oversight is for the health of the business and the company, which includes the employees, right? So when you have that perspective, looking at these issues, listening to folks like you, the three of you and others like you in this space, talking about, listen, you need to explore a employee first perspective and who we can be for the employee rather than who they can be for the business perspective. What would you say to these boards? What would you say in terms of how we can bring together that perspective that sits on the board still today versus what we need to do to attract more talent today, given who the talent is, the human being is today? Kelly, I'm going to start with you.
I think that we have to help the board bridge the connection between talent, risk, and ability to execute strategy. If you don't have the right talent strategies, that includes your reputation, your mission, your purpose, all of those things. We need to bridge the implications financially. We need to bridge the implications to the risk to execution or becoming irrelevant. That is where the board has a purpose and oversight. And I think what we, just to use a live example, I chair the compensation committee at Form Factor. I think we weren't talking about culture audits and human capital issues or skills that we may need or the effects of automation in the compensation committee. But we have been evolving the charter of that committee in line with many of you, I'm sure, as you look at this, which at first would have looked very soft or not the board's area. And now in combination with some of the other newer directors too, are making that bridge over to, guys, this is really important. We cannot execute the strategy unless we cover these topics. And so, yes, it's a tailwind, the fact that all the other orgs are now starting to talk about it, or NACD, but this started a long time ago. So it's our job as, leaders on the board to help that bridge, create that bridge for everyone.
Thank you. In the last couple of minutes, Jenny, if you can, and Sean next, just how do you see it? What would you like to see on boards?
Yeah, so similar to Kelly, I chair the comp committee for the board that I sit on. And what I would love to see comp committees evolved to is actually to change the name from comp committee to the people committee or people, culture, and leadership, or some variation. A lot of forward-looking companies are taking that a broader view of the charter and changing the name, and really thinking about the end-to-end talent process and looking at, and it's not hard. You can go just without a dashboard view, all of the steps of the talent, life cycle, and compensation is one of those. It's very important, but employer branding, talent attraction, talent acquisition, onboarding, performance management, talent management, all the way through succession. You should be looking at the leadership, growth, and who's success. Never be surprised when CEO or the C-suite resigns or wins the lottery and you have to backfill that. If a comp committee can have a broader view of talent, the full talent life cycle, they're going to be so much better off and really, really able to serve the company. And you were talking about the difference in generation and experience between the talent that's coming in and maybe the people that sit on the board. My advice to that is to look at data and be questioning gut instincts from experiences from the 80s and the 90s, but really going with a data first approach and saying, what does the data look like? What is our employee engagement survey? What is our employer branding metrics look like? What are candidates saying that turn us down in the interview process? What is our exit survey data look like? Why are people resigning, right? Go to data at your company and then also across the industry.
Wonderful. I'm going to turn to Sean, and before I do, I'll come back to each of you for your one-line takeaways, if you don't mind, before we adjourn. But Sean, please.
I think Jenny and Kelly really nailed it. I think I think the best comp committees on boards generally already realize that their remit is broader than comp. My favorite comp committee things are, talk a little bit about compensation, and then very quickly it talks about, let's talk about the executive team. let's talk about, who do you think can scale? Are you worried about anybody? Who do we need to add to the team? What talent are we missing? And very quickly, it's a people conversation in addition to a comp conversation. I think also that the point about tying it to these financial metrics and to this data, really, really critical, especially if you're dealing with a gap in sort of time. Looking at it from a financial perspective, from a data perspective, really, the data doesn't lie, right?
It's the foundation.
Always tying it back to that, and I think you'd be successful.
Kelly, your one sentence line to all of our participants.
80% of the cost in an organization is talent. So if you're not focused on the risk that you have with talent and the evolving nature of work as a board, I think you're missing the boat.
Thank you. Jenny?
I would say take the long view of talent. Try to not sort of knee-jerk react to quarterly metrics and think about growing talent from within, which is a long-term investment.
Perfect. And Sean, how about you?
Yeah, putting employees first, realizing that flexibility and the desire for flexibility is not a fad. It's probably here to stay. And so rather than fighting it and trying to figure out how we can put guardrails about it, like embrace it and realize this is probably the way that I'm going to be able to get the best people in my organization. If 80% of my cost and 80% of my upside is tied up in getting the right people on the bus, the proverbial bus, that's the key.
Thank you. Thank you all. I know Kelly's got to run. Jenny's got to run. Sean's got to run. Thank you all for being here and all of this incredible information at this time. I will let you all go ahead and sign off and get to your next meetings. And for all of the participants that are here with us today, remember this is a series that we're having, and join us for the second webinar, which is now that we've acquired this talent, how do we retain them? And I'll turn it back over to Nancy. Thank you again.
Thanks everybody again for joining us. I will send a follow-up email with some additional resources and information and hope you can join our next session. Thank you again to Jenny, to Kelly, to Sean, to Banashe. Really grateful for your time and wonderful expertise. Have a great day, everybody.